Hey, this is Brian for Liberty, and I am doing the thing again where I do a quick response video. Now, I did a quick response video before, and I don't think that it really should be necessary to talk about why socialism is a terrible idea, but apparently it is, and so then I'm going to do it. Now, this is a video by Second Thought, and it is 24 minutes long, and I'm going to try and break this up into 3 separate videos, so I'm actually creating a bunch of content, not just commenting on somebody else's. This is a well-produced piece. And this is something that's really starting to bother me, and that is the rise of rational socialism. And what I mean by that is this really honeyed voice explaining to you why socialism is such a great idea, why capitalism is so evil. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why that message works and resonates with young people. But I always want to start with this. This is personally one of my favorite things.
Consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/secondthought.
Who could?
The first thing that the anti-capitalists will do when they do these videos is the capitalist thing, which is give me some of your evil capitalist dollars so that I can, go and buy stuff. And I wonder how much decision making they make over here at Second Thought, where they actually push the decision making down to the worker and let the workers who produce and create these videos decide. Now, look, maybe these guys will come back and say, well, first they won't because I'm a tiny creator, but maybe these guys will come back and I'll find out that that's exactly how they run their whole organization is run like a socialist organization from top to bottom. But my guess is that that's actually not the case. But I digress. I always just like that. Here's the quick evil.
Could possibly think socialism is a good thing.
Socialism is a cocktail that never should be tried.
No, it's turpentine.
None of those ingredients are good.
The last thing we want in the United States is socialism.
According to a new survey, 70% of American millennials say they'll likely vote socialist, and 1 in 3 of them view communism favorably.
The term socialist has been gaining traction for the past couple of years. There's a good chance an increasing number of people around you are using that word to describe themselves. More and more Americans are. Maybe one of those people even sent you this video.
Maybe one of these people even sent you this video. That he says that for a second time. It's true. This is 100% accurate, right? We have more and more people who are starting to identify socialism as a positive thing, as a good thing. But what is socialism? I like the idea. I like the idea of somebody coming out and explaining to the layman what is socialism. So I got into this video and I said, look, I've done videos on different platforms where I've gotten harangued for not really having a solid understanding of Marx theory or how Marx answers certain questions that I have. And I'll be honest, there's a part of me that's real hesitant to put out content because while I've read several books on economics and I consider myself probably a little bit more informed than the average person out there. I want to be right when I say things. So I thought, here, socialism for absolute beginners. This isn't some 5-minute video. It's a 20-some-odd minute video. So I thought this might have some good information in it. So let me take a watch and see what this guy has to say. And I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to comment on some of what he has to say. But the core message of socialism that is portrayed by this gentleman is the one I hear by most people. And it's a scary, scary message, but there's a reason it resonates.
Maybe one of those people even sent you this video.
I told you he did it twice.
This video is about what people mean when they call themselves socialists. I'm going to be covering as much ground as possible in as little time as I can to give you a better understanding of a...
So let me start by saying what an incredibly socialist way to actually start this video. What he says is, I'm going to tell you what people he presumably has not met, mean when they say socialism. So isn't that funny? This is a very socialist way to start a video. What he's telling you is, I'm going to tell you how all these other people view this economic theory and what they mean by it. He's not taking this is the collective thought process of, I can speak for all of these people because we are all the same. And that's not true. Anybody who's argued with more than 2 or 3 people on socialism, I've heard 4 different versions of what socialism actually is.
A word we hear all the time, but that rarely gets explained all that well. And before we do, I know that at least a chunk of you will be coming in with a negative opinion of socialism, and that's totally fine. Feel free to voice that in the comments or the invisible to you but very real to me dislike bar. All I ask is that you stick around for a while after you do.
I do appreciate the fact that he knows that we're coming in with a bad connotation or a bad view of socialism. And look, He has a bad view of capitalism. It's okay. All right. So at the outro or at the intro, what at the start of this, it's like, hey, it's okay for us to have a difference of opinion. It's okay for us to look at things differently, and I like that. Though this very person has a video that literally goes into why it's not a good idea to be a centrist, or why it's not a good idea to allow opposing opinions to see the air, or to allow opposing opinions out there. I will give him at least he's right in that. Back to the video.
Politics is all about disagreement, but to have meaningful disagreements, you need to know what it is you disagree with. Let's get started. The central idea that unites all socialists is maximizing freedom for everyone, regardless of who they are. Generally speaking, socialists want people to have the kinds of rights that ensure they have that freedom. The guaranteed right to education, healthcare, food, and shelter, to participate in and constitute democratic bodies.
Okay. You're getting into the freedom argument, which is one of the arguments that I really have a problem with when it comes to socialism, because what you're getting here is not just
the right to free time, and
you're not just getting an argument about freedom. Let's keep going and get into exactly what rights he's talking about when he says
regardless of who they are. Generally speaking, socialists want people to have the kinds of rights that ensure they have that freedom. The guaranteed right to education, healthcare, food, and shelter, to participate in and constitute democratic bodies, the right to free time and leisure. All of these are rights that increase our freedom and the extent to which we can flourish and live a good life. But it's not enough that these rights exist on paper. People need to be able to exercise them. If you have the freedom to an education, but can't afford to spend even
Okay, so this is pretty important stuff, and I get this. I swear I get this backwards every single time. So what we're doing is talking about two different types of rights, and there's an interesting little and I'm looking it up on my phone. I'm a little bit of a cheater. There's an interesting part of The Handmaid's Tale that gets into this a little bit. If you've watched The Handmaid's Tale, they get into this a little bit. So what we're talking about is, in Handmaid's Tale, the way they illustrate this is the freedom from and the freedom to. Okay. What that means is you have a freedom from the responsibility. So what socialism really offers is the freedom from. It's the freedom from the responsibility to have to provide for yourself. That's my personal. Society's gonna provide you with all the things that you need: healthcare, housing, all the things that he's mentioning here. We're gonna provide all those things to you. And what that does is you have the freedom from having to worry about those things. And socialists get confused into thinking that they have the freedom from the responsibility to provide for themselves, but they're still going to have the freedom to do whatever they want. And that's not how freedom works. You can have the freedom from responsibility, but you will also have an inability to direct your own life. Or you can have the freedom to direct your own life, but then what that comes with is a responsibility to provide and care for yourself. And so those are the two things. And so what he's talking about here is negative and positive rights, wherein as a libertarian, I believe we have rights that exist only insofar as they do not infer that someone else has to provide those rights. To have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But I do not have the right to health care, because the right to health care implies that someone else is obligated through action. I'm obligating or creating an obligation on somebody else to provide me with something that I have a right to. You cannot have a right to somebody else's labor. It's the first and key flaw of socialism. Now, the argument will be that we need a society that provides all these things for people, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, you cannot have a right to the product of somebody else's labor. So you could make an argument for a moral obligation as a wealthy society to take care of the least amongst us. You could make an argument for social democracies, which uses taxes to create massive social safety nets. You can make arguments for that, but you cannot make a moral argument that you have a right to somebody else's labor, period.
1 hour less on the job to go to class, then you don't really have the freedom to an education. The law says you do, but you're not actually free to enjoy it. Think about it like this. We might have missed out on 1,000 Einsteins because poverty kept them from achieving their full potential. Having freedom and the actual ability to exercise it is critical.
We also might have missed out on 1,000 Einsteins because we had them out growing freaking potatoes under some socialist authoritarian economic system instead of free to pursue their interests. So there you go with the freedom from and the freedom to rearing its ugly head in terms of which way is the better way to go. At the end of the day, you have to be free to direct your own life, which means you also have the responsibility to provide for yourself.
And this central concern with freedom isn't very surprising. Every political theory wants to maximize or guarantee freedom in some way. If the US had its own ideology, Americanism or something, its advocates would also say it's all about freedom. And to be fair, capitalism did after all become the way of life for most people around the world, at least in part because it allowed some people to be more free than they had been before.
Okay, so this is the secondary appeal of socialism that's coming up, and this is the appeal to envy. Some people, he's planting the seed, right? And what he's going to do here is he's gonna draw out this illustration of how you're not free, but these people are free, and it's an appeal to, and basically it's just an appeal to envy.
Because before capitalism, there was something else: feudalism. Think medieval castles with heaped tables of George R.R. Martin-esque pigs with apples in their mouths and guys with cool names like Torf.
Okay, first of all, let me just compliment him on coming up with a cool name like Torf. I love that name, and if I have another son, maybe Torf. But I'm going to teach him to eat like those bacon wrapped turkey legs, and when people ask him what his name is, he'll just be able to look up and go Torf and walk away. Long hair, dreads, the whole bit. It'll be amazing. One of the interesting things for me on the feudalism, I'm only 3 minutes into this video for Pete's sake. One of the interesting things to me on feudalism is the idea that when you talk about lords and ladies and castles and all that, and I drive to work every day and I pass this massive new building that's been built, this new structure in Greenville, South Carolina. It's like a $68 million building that is built by the lords and ladies, right? The political class in the United States are the new lords and ladies. We're the feudal class, or we're the workers, or the whatever they were called back in the feudal days. We're out there doing our jobs, and we're having to render unto them, and they build these castles to themselves. And that's as close as you get to feudalism right there. And so people would say, well, Jeff Bezos and Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and these guys, and what about them? You don't have to go and work for those people. You don't have to work. You can go out and earn a living without working for a single billionaire. And you can just go out on your own and you can establish your own little empire and build your own little thing all by yourself. And you don't have to work for any of those people. But you, no matter how you pursue your life, you are going to render unto those lords and ladies a good portion of your productivity.
Under feudal society, the people who were free made up a tiny group. Kings and other nobles were free. Everyone else lived under their control and generally had very little freedom. After all, nobles owned all the land in their kingdom. So if you weren't a noble, but you wanted a place to live, to not be in total abject poverty, and to have a semblance of security, you were forced into working the noble's land. A pretty sweet deal for the nobility, because once you had done all the work, farming and whatnot, they would collect their taxes and force you to give up the products of your labor. Grain, meat, or the...
Can we just pause right here? I want to compliment him on using the term taxes. Taxes. Robin Hood didn't steal from the rich. He stole ill-gotten tax money from the nobility and gave it back to the workers. Taxes. Money that is taken coercively and by force. And this is one of the key issues of socialism is, and he's leaning into it a little already. Essentially, what they do is they take this coercive force of like work or we're going to kill you and we're going to take all the product of your labor, feudalism. And then he's going to compare it to the fact that if you don't work in capitalism, then you'll die because you'll starve. And, if you want a house and pay for a house and pay for food and pay for health care, you still have to work. And so you have to pay the rich and the wealthy, and then or you won't get the things you need to keep you alive. The idea, he's mixing the idea that in order to survive in a capitalist society, you have to work, which is true. But that's a basic fundamental human condition. It doesn't have anything to do with an economic. There's not an economic system that everybody can just not work. Things need to be done. Production needs to happen. The idea that you should be able to not contribute to your own survival in any way is only an idea that can exist in capitalism, where survival has become so easy that we think it should just be a birthright. So isn't that
the money made from trading them with others.
I think it's interesting.
But feudalism wouldn't last forever. The emergence of capitalism changed feudal society into something entirely new. Over a couple hundred years, merchants gained more autonomy from feudal lords and became a whole new class of relatively free people. Nobles lost a great deal of power both gradually and in violent revolutions, and the number of free people grew from just a few hundred nobles to thousands of people who weren't just born into the right family.
So that's what capitalism did, and he's right. And I appreciate the fact that he gives capitalism that credit. As a socialist, I appreciate the fact that he has the intellectual honesty to at least grant that capitalism allowed us to move out of this feudal phase and into something better. Of course, then we draw this comparison, unfortunately, between modern day capitalists, modern day robber barons, is what they'll refer to him later in this video. And what he does is he takes that, compares it to feudal lords, and uses, like I said earlier, uses the fact that you do, in fact, have to contribute to your own survival, even in capitalism, and compares that to the essential enslavement of people under feudal lords. And that's a very unfair comparison. And maybe I'm spoiling the end here.
Capitalism was born. And we can see how this new system works today. Under a capitalist society, your boss is part of this new group of free people. He, like the nobility of the previous economic era, has a lot of freedom to do what he wants, and a lot of the decisions he makes for himself trickle down and ultimately affect you.
So the implication here, of course, is that you're not free. And that bothers me. That's what bothers me. That hopelessness, that idea that all you can do in a capitalist society, the only thing you have the capability to do is to go and work for someone else. He's here on YouTube creating his own wealth, creating his own industry, certainly with a group of people working and supporting him. He's creating his own thing, while at the same time telling you that you can't do that the only way for you to succeed is to go or to survive, essentially, because you're not free if you're working. The only way for you to survive is to go and work for a boss. Like that bothers me, because it's almost like a victimization that's taking place, where it's this person's convincing you. The first thing they have to do, the first thing that anybody on the economic or social left in this country has to do, is convince you that you are some kind of a victim, either socially or economically, to another class of people. And then they can sell you a solution. They can't tell you how to use the system that you're in to your own advantage, because independence and individuality and individual success is the antithesis of what they want. They don't want you to be successful, because if you were successful, really successful, you wouldn't want this program. You wouldn't want this economic system to exist.
In the relationship between the two of you, it's ultimately him that has the power. For example, your paycheck isn't determined.
By the way, that's a subtle thing there. It's him who has the power, and it's a man on one side and a woman on the other. Maybe I'm paranoid, but is that not just a kind of a subtle thing that happened right there? I think it was.
By how good a job you do, but by what your boss decides it to be. He has that freedom. Directly or indirectly, your boss hires and fires.
Okay, so that's not true. That's fundamentally, that's a false thing. The market determines what your labor is worth. The market determines. Your boss has no power, zero control. He has the power to tell you what he's willing to give you for your labor. But if my boss came to me tomorrow and said, Brian, I'm only going to pay you $15 an hour to do your job, I would quit in a second. And I would move on to someplace else, because I know that the labor that I do, the work that I do, is far more valuable in the market than $15 an hour. That's a fundamentally false statement. It's a flat out lie that your boss controls. No, the market controls what your labor's worth. Look, I don't care where you lie on the economic spectrum, but you know that your boss can't just come to you tomorrow and cut your salary in half. You would leave because the market is going to, because if you have the requisite skills, the market is going to provide you a means to maintain or even grow your income. One of the best ways, as a matter of fact, one of the best pieces of advice is in another leftist video, as a matter of fact, is that the way to move your career forward, or the way to make more money, is to leave your employer. So job jumping is how people get the big raises, which tells you that bosses now actually have far less control over you. The fact that you're not going to the same place and working there for 40 years and then retiring tells you that your boss actually has far less control over you now than he did 50 years ago, because there's so much economic opportunity out there and so many different avenues for you to increase your own wealth and get more value for your labor that your boss can't hold on to. People are moving from job to job because there is a labor market that is hungry for talent. And this is trying to teach you the exact opposite, and that drives me nuts. Now, look, I'm going to hang it up here at this point. I appreciate you guys coming. This is Brian for Liberty. I appreciate you stopping by. I'm going to do another, let's see, I'm about 4 minutes into this, so I'm probably do another 4 or 5 videos on this very topic on this video. So subscribe and turn on notifications so you can catch the next one, my next piece. I will talk less. We'll get further into the video next time. I promise you that. Thanks again for stopping by. Like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and we'll catch you guys next time.